Hi, I'm Dr. Thomas Armstrong, and I'm making a series of short videos to introduce my new book, The Power of Neurodiversity: Unleashing the Advantages of Your Neurodivergent Brain. This is a completely revised and updated second edition of a book that I originally wrote in 2010. The topic for today's video is the evolutionary advantages of dyslexia. In 1993, Tom Hartman, who is a well-known political commentator, multiple volume author, and a person who has ADHD, wrote a book called Attention Deficit Disorder: A Different Perception. And he had this rather remarkable thing to say about ADHD. He said, people with ADHD are hunters in a farmer's world. He said if you're growing up in prehistoric times or in a hunter culture, your ability to move around would be important. And that's hyperactivity. Your ability to respond quickly to anything that's going on, that would be impulsivity. And your ability to shift your attention as you heard things, twigs snapping and animal sounds, that's distractibility. So these very same symptoms that are associated with ADHD were positive advantages in those times. And so he gave us an evolutionary basis for ADHD, helping to answer the question, if ADHD or autism or dyslexia are so bad, why are the genes for those disorders still in the gene pool? Why haven't they been selected out? According to Darwin's theory of natural selection, if you acquire a trait that doesn't work well in terms of adapting to your environment, that's going to affect your well-being. You may die. If you die, you don't pass on your genes. So that's evolution's way of making sure that only the strong survive, I guess would be the way to put it. In terms of autism, Temple Grandin, the great autism advocate and animal engineer, made a comment about the evolutionary perspective on autism. She said, "Who do you think made the first stone spear? That wasn't the yakety yak sitting around the campfire. It was someone with Asperger's sitting in the back of a cave figuring out how to chip rocks into spearheads. Without some autistic traits, you wouldn't even have a recording device to record this conversation on." So here she's given us a perspective on the possible evolutionary advantages of autism. So what about dyslexia? Well, in terms of dyslexia, and I put it rather crudely, back then reading didn't count for squat. I guess is the way you'd put it. Look at this timeline. Take a look at this timeline. It shows in the first arrow, modern humans evolved about 300,000 years ago. And of course, our primate ancestors even longer than that. Then we went 295,000 years without books, without literacy. And literacy in books didn't begin until 5,000 years ago, until the early Sumerian culture in the Middle East. So in that interim between man or humans first emerging and literacy arising, there's a span of almost 300,000 years, during which you could have a dyslexic brain, but it wouldn't have made any difference. It wouldn't have affected you one iota because there were no books. There was nothing there to give you a hard time, at least in terms of words and literacy. Meanwhile, it's very probable you had a lot of positive things going on, which led to you being able to continue to reproduce and survive. And I wanted in this lecture to do a little speculation on what are some of the possible evolutionary advantages that dyslexics had back in the day that allowed them to survive and bring their genes into the current day. So the first thought, or the first, this isn't a thought, there's research backing this up, um, that peripheral vision seems to be more developed in people with dyslexia. And that may be in a way why they have difficulty reading text in a book, because they have more difficulty with focused attention where you're scanning the middle of the text. But if they put the text on on the periphery, which they should do, that might be a better way of teaching reading. So anyway, what is the value of peripheral vision in the prehistoric times? Being able to see behind you, so to speak, eyes in the back of your head. I sometimes like to call this Kung Fu eyes. You remember Kung Fu, that character played by David Carradine, and well, maybe you don't remember it. It was about 30 years ago. But at any rate, he had that kind of ability to see what was behind him. And so what about this trait? Well, as a hunter, let's say you were walking along with your tribe and seeking, dinner, so to speak, in terms of an animal that you were hunting. And as you walked along, wouldn't it be an advantage to have peripheral vision, to be able to see things creeping out in the corners? It might be a possible animal that would eat you. It might be a possible animal that you would eat. And it might be possible another tribe, either one that you're warring with or one that you're allied with. In any case, having that peripheral perception allowed you to stay present and catch most of the things that might be out there that it would be important for you to know. Three-dimensional or 3D visual spatial intelligence is another strength. And this is not speculation. This is something that has been established in scientific journals. But in terms of prehistoric times, and now here I am speculating, it would seem to me that if a saber-toothed tiger was jumping you in the manner shown in this picture, that having very good 3D visual spatial intelligence would be a factor in your survival. In other words, being able to aim that spike right where his heart is, rather than a little bit this way or a little bit that way, would prove possibly fatal, maybe very probably fatal for the hunter. So having that 3D mind, which sees, and it's connected to the peripheral idea, that you're able to kind of see all around you, would be a positive trait for your survival in a hunting and gathering society. Similarly, and we're still talking very about the same kind of thing, global perception, being able to see all around you, being able to see fuzzy data. They've done experiments where they've taken people with dyslexia and neurotypical people, and they've showed them these blurry photos and then told them to look at the feature in the square labeled B and see if they could find it in the square labeled A. And it turns out, and this is a kind of a mystifying graph here, but it shows the learning curve. In other words, it shows how quickly they were able to learn how to spot that B in the A global picture. And you can see the people with dyslexia initially were not doing it as well, but then they, after the first repeat, they learned really quickly. Their learning curve, look how much they're going down in this case is good. It means that they're responding more quickly. They're getting a quicker answer. And notice how that really just descends until finally it's as good or better than the neurotypicals seeing it for the first time. So this suggests that people with dyslexia have this fuzzy global perception. And think about this in terms of prehistoric times. Being able to read the clouds may have been much more important than today's reading a book, because the clouds may have signaled the beginning of a tropical rainstorm, the beginning of a drought, the beginning of potentially fatal lightning. Similarly, other features of nature that are fuzzy, looking at the water, for example, in a river or a lake, and being able to notice how it's swirling may tell you whether or not you're nearing a rapids that might, prove to be very difficult going. So having some of those traits, fuzzy perception traits in prehistoric times may have been an evolutionary advantage. Another aspect that is a strength of dyslexia is big picture thinking. You think of someone like Richard Branson, who had this big idea for a business, and it became Virgin Airways, and then it became hundreds of other businesses. And now he's got a space mission project going on, and he's got plans for supersonic planes taking us from the US to Europe in like 3.5 hours instead of 8 hours, and so forth. Well, this is an interesting discovery. They're referred to as Nazca lines, and this is what was discovered in the deserts of southern Peru, or maybe it's northern Peru. I've got my head upside down. But at any rate, the amazing thing about these lines is that they can only be seen up in the air. And back then, when they were done in the pre-Columbian times, there were no airplanes. There were no, they made some pretty big ziggurats and temples, at least in the Maya Empire, and certainly in the Inca as well. I've seen Machu Picchu, and that's pretty impressive. And they got that done pretty high in the air. But we're talking about airplane here, and there was no airplane around. So there was somebody with a really big picture mind who could see even as they were dropping pebbles or whatever it was that they made, digging ditches or whatever, to make this incredible gestalt picture. And that may have been an advantage. Somehow, this may have been a way of communicating to other tribes, much as in Africa, drums are used as tribal sounds to send information to one place to another. And this might have been for people that also had that aerial bird's eye view perception in other regions, communicating what was going on in this neck of the woods. And then there's a well-known strength of dyslexia in art. The neurologist Norman Geschwind said that he could often tell in the families of dyslexics that if he saw a 3-year-old child building with Legos, well, they didn't have Legos back when he said that, but building with bricks, small Lincoln logs, that goes too far back, but at any rate, or drawing, or other kinds of mechanical interests, he said that would, lead him to believe that this would also probably be a dyslexic child because they tended to have gifts in that area. So you look at the cave drawings, and again, we're talking about communication. People with dyslexia didn't have language to bother with, and they might in fact have been experts in reading and writing visual spatial symbols and conveying information in that way. And I was also looking at this cave drawing and I was thinking, that's a little bit like the Nazca lines. It's almost as if he's looking at this hunting expedition from above. And it's a way of giving information, maybe about a successful hunt, maybe like a football diagram. This is how the hunters are arraigned in such a way that they can be most effective in capturing their prey and so forth. So anyway, that's a little bit about what are some of the possible evolutionary advantages of dyslexia. There's no proof yet, but I think there are really suggestive hints that we have that people with dyslexia back in those days, well, we know for sure that they didn't have to worry about their reading and their writing. There was there were no reading remedial specialists during those days. Nothing for them to feel bad about. And in fact, they may have known these other languages and these other perceptions that made them perhaps leaders in their tribe. So that's a little bit about what's in my book, The Power of Neurodiversity. I hope you should get the book. I hope you share it with your friends, family, teachers, parents, therapists, employees, employers, and that it is useful information that you can use to celebrate neurodiversity. If you want to sign up for my blog posts, many of which have to do with neurodiversity, you can go to my website, which is www.institute4learning.com. That's institute4learning.com, and put your email address in and subscribe, and you'll receive my 200-item neurodiversity strengths checklist, which is right from the book. And it's a strength-based assessment that should come as a welcome relief to many neurodivergent adults and teens and young adults who have taken tests all their lives which have shown them what they couldn't do. And I think it's about time they took a test that told them what they could do, what they were good at. And it's not really a test, it's a checklist. You don't score anything. You don't compare yourself to other people. You just learn a lot about, or remember a lot about, what you're good at in life. So thanks so much for listening and for watching this video. I hope it was useful to you. And I hope that whoever you are and wherever you are, you take the neurodiversity banner and proudly show it to others. Even in an environment where diversity has come under attack, we should feel proud being neurodivergent people. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.